Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Well, we finally got some rain and it's cooled it off just a teeny bit. We got pretty decent amount of rain last night, probably starting around between 10 and 11 o'clock into the overnight hours. It wasn't too severe, although there was some severe weather in our region. We just didn't get it here. But you know, it wasn't a gully washer, right? The creeks aren't overflowing or anything, but it was a decent little rain, and we needed it. And the temperature this morning is about 10 degrees cooler than it was this time yesterday morning. So I'm not complaining because, man, it's been stifling the last few days. So this video may be more, there may be more humor in this. I don't know. This popped up and I thought it was worthy of making a video. Kind of inspired me a little bit. So Dr. Phil, you guys all know who he is. He's still, I didn't even know he still had a show, but because I've never watched him. I mean, I've seen little clips and stuff, but I never watched him. But apparently his more recent show he did on preppers and encouraging people to prepare. And I watched, it's on YouTube. I watched a few minutes of it. So I didn't watch the whole show, so maybe things were different if you watched the whole thing. But from what I watched, he seemed very positive. The people that he had on there, they weren't like from the old TV show Doomsday Preppers that are a bunch of lunatics. I mean, they probably weren't some of the more ideal, I guess you could say. But, you know, it wasn't like we're going to get these people on here and make them look like a Jerry Springer show. It seemed to be pretty decent. Like I said, the little bit that I watched is okay. My first question is how bad is it that Dr. Phil is telling people to prepare? That Dr. Phil is encouraging people. And that right there, prepping, while it has always been considered for the most part in the last couple of decades as this fringe thing, these people that are hyper paranoid, that they just live in fear. I still get that all the time. Oh, you must live in fear all the time. No, actually I don't. I live a pretty fearless life, and any stress that I have is not related at all to the world coming to an end. It's just other things. So that's not how I live. I don't know about you, but I'm not living in fear because I'm prepared mentally, physically, and most importantly, spiritually. But anyway, so this show kind of showcased that. And we're seeing preparedness, and we're seeing, I've watched over the last year or two, quite a few fairly prominent figures in the media, just popular people, I guess you could say in their own right, come out and say people need to start stocking up. People need to start getting ready. People that you wouldn't have expected it from a lot of times. And so that right there tells me that number one, things are getting pretty bad if mainstream is starting to tell people, all right, now it's time to prepare. Even governments, if you look over at England and several European governments, Germany and others, they've been telling people to, you know, stockpile food, stockpile water, stockpile medicine. It's going to get to that point that you're going to need it. And so, number one, we should probably take notice of this and use it as motivation. Number one, I mean, I guess you could gloat and say, well, see, I told you so, and I'm ahead of the curve, which all of you should be. But number two, use it as motivation that you're on the right track and you should probably continue doing more. Because unless you're some big billionaire, the average person is never completely prepared. We're always working towards preparedness. It's a journey. And so as things worsen, and as you start to get, that's why I like to mention the things that's going on in the news or the things that are happening in our world, not so that it can cause you to be afraid of what's going on, but so that you can get a better idea of what is more likely to happen so that you can prepare accordingly to it. You know, if you're preparing for one thing and then another thing is kind of happening, I mean, that's why I say just prepare in general. Just do it all. But at least you can maybe not be blindsided by knowing what's going on. So it's becoming more mainstream. It's a whole industry. It really is. I mean, there's a whole industry surrounding preparedness. So again, first thing is that you're on the right track. Keep moving. Next thing I noticed in the little bit of video that I watched of it, I had this guy on there that had written a book, and he'd actually done some research, and he researched during the Cold War. And he spoke of kind of the difference during the Cold War of prepping. Of course, it wasn't called prepping back in the 60s and 70s, but people that were becoming prepared because of a possible collapse because of nuclear war and all this kind of stuff. He said it was a little different in the United States than it was in Europe. In the United States, the mentality is to isolate yourself, build a bunker, stock up full of stuff, and just shut yourself off from society when the time is right. And you are your own island. You know, you are your own island. You're taking care of yourself. You have to do your own defense. Everyone else is a threat, potential threat, all that kind of stuff. And I'll admit, in the beginning, that's where I was. In fact, I've even said on this channel a few years back, and to a certain extent, we still do this, but that we view our property as an island. And when my wife and I are planning and preparing and figuring out what we need to do to develop our property, what stuff we need, we look at our property as an island, meaning that if we were cut off from the outside world completely, what would we need on our property to survive? And we understand that it's impossible for us to have everything we need. But what is it to survive? Because surviving is very different than thriving. It's very different than living a good life. If it comes down to it, if it's the most extreme case scenario, can we at least survive? We may not be comfortable, we may not enjoy it, but can we at least survive? And that's our first goal on our property and our homestead, is to set up a scenario where we can at least survive even if we're miserable. And then from there, try to do things that make us less miserable to the point that we're really thriving on our property. And so he said that was kind of the mentality in the American side, is that, you know, we're just going to isolate ourselves and do our very best to just eke out some kind of survival, you know, that we can just stay alive. He said with the Europeans, it was very different. And I'm not typically the one to advocate doing things like Europeans do, but I think in this sense I would. He said over in Europe, their concept is that, and you have to understand that Europe even today is still predominantly made up of small villages, which is actually true for America. You go through the Midwest, especially in South, and America is mostly made up of little small towns. And so the European model of preparedness was that instead of one person digging a hole, putting a bunker in, filling it packed full of food and guns and medical so that they can survive, the concept is that the whole village would come together and figure out their preparedness, and they would survive together, so that one person didn't need to necessarily have all this, you know, ammunition, all these guns, all this food, all this medical. They would come together and do it as a community, even to the point of potentially building a bunker for the community. And as much as I'm not a fan of most European things, I think that's a better model. And I think that's something that many of us, depending on where you're located, can do also. I'm not saying your little community or town is going to build a bunker, but many of them already have them. They have tornado shelters that, while they're not exactly a bunker, could be used as a shelter for that. But coming together as a group of people, as a community, and realizing that instead of me trying to come up with everything that I need and have to develop all the skills, I was talking at our meeting, I believe it was, just this past weekend, about as we go down this path of preparedness, and self-sufficiency. That, to me, it's all the same. We quickly realize that, man, we really have to have a lot of different skills, like a lot of stuff going on. Like, it's not just like, oh, I know how to raise chickens, I'm going to be a prepper and be self-sufficient. No, you have to know all kinds of things. Like, it's really kind of overwhelming at times, of all the different skills that you really need to develop, even if you're just beginner in those skills, to really be self-sufficient. Whereas if you do it as a community, you don't have to. I've used this example many times. Think of the Amish. While most Amish, and I know this because there's Amish around, I'm friends with Amish. I respect, I don't agree with everything that they do and believe, but I do have a lot of respect for them. But in the Amish community, typically, everyone can do a lot of things. Okay, everyone can shoe a horse for the most part. Everyone can grow a garden. Everyone can do construction. At least, let's say the men on the men's stuff, and the women. All the women can bake. All the women can garden. All this kind of stuff. But there are people within the community that specialize in things, and they become more experts. And so the community says, well, not everyone has to know how to repair wagons. But this guy over here can do it. This guy over here can repair them. He's really good. He's the expert, so we're going to go to him. Not everyone needs to be an expert in blacksmithing. I mean, I can kind of do it if I have to. But instead, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to rely on this guy in our community because he's the expert. And that's really how their communities function and flow, but also grow, because everyone is dependent upon everyone to get things done. And I know many of you are starting to think this is starting to sound like some kind of communistic society. No, it's not. Don't believe that lie. That's a lie that they're trying to tell us. This is the typical, normal community that humans have existed in since we existed, up until just a few decades ago. And so if we can build our communities, whether it's just a few families or an entire town, to do that, then we're gonna do a lot better with all this that's going on. And so again, the little bit that I watched of Dr. Phil kind of reiterated the concept that we have taken, whereas yes, everyone needs to be able to survive and depend, be self-sufficient on their own, but we can do that a whole lot better as a community. And so we are, instead of necessarily building a community, like taking people from all over the world to build a community, we are trying to take an existing rural community and just encourage it to be more prepared. And when we do that, then there's less risk of people in the community turning to do bad things and turning on each other, because we've worked together, we've built relationships, we've built emotional ties and bonds, and we're all prepared together, and we're able to help each other out. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but that's just the way society's always been. If one person gets hurt or they need something, the community comes together and they help them with that. And that's really the way it should be. And if we can start going down that path to where we're kind of working things out together, and this is the big one, we don't need the big brother government. When things fall apart, we're not going to run to them, we're not going to need them, and we'll be able to stand more securely on our feet because we're not dependent upon their system that is collapsing. We would have our own system. And I know this sounds like a huge, huge thing to do, and it is, but it is doable. That's the thing, it's doable. If you put the effort into it, it's doable. And so whether it's just a few families or 500 people or 1,000 people, I would try as much as you can to work on community preparedness, of getting the people around you. They don't necessarily all have to be up to your level of being prepared, but that they are getting prepared. They understand the concept. They have that mindset, and they're doing their best to get caught up. If you can do that, then the chances of you surviving and thriving through all of this are going to greatly increase. Folks, it's time to get your houses in order. and to prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.